How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia. Today I thought we'd do a little color grading exercise to show you how to make a LUT that doesn't suck. Let's go. Alright, I've got a clip loaded up in Premiere Pro. It's got no color correction on it whatsoever. This is straight out of the camera. Let's have a look. So this is a shot from a promo video I did for my buddy Vedran, who's a DJ, just promoting his next mix that was coming out. This was shot on the A7 III with the Canon 85mm f1.8 lens at f1.8 to get that kind of nice cinematic separation. The whole thing was recorded in hybrid log gamma 3, which I'll put the settings that I used in the description if that's what you want to use as well. If you shoot in Cine or if you shoot in S-Log2, it's the same principle that I'm going to apply here. It's just that you need to bring things a little bit further for S-Log2 and bring things not quite so far with Cine because the gamma differences between them are just, they're different, right? But what I want to show you here is the kind of basics, the concept of how you make a LUT, how you make a color treatment that you can then save and share with other people or sell on your store, like I do. So we're just gonna come straight up to the color tab. If you can't see this color tab, come over to Window, Workspaces, and there you should find Color, or it's Alt-Shift-4. Not sure what it is on Mac, probably Option-Shift-4. All right, so in the color tab then you get your lumetri panel here. Let's just open up our scopes as well so that we can see that as a reference of how much light and dark is in this shot. Okay, so what I've got in this shot is pretty shallow blacks, pretty shallow whites. It's fairly desaturated, but the nice thing about hybrid log gamma is that it doesn't desaturate everything too much. It doesn't give you an image that you really have to work hard on to color grade. It gives you an image that's very easy to color grade, which is why I recommend using it if you have a camera that's capable of that. So the A7 III, A7R III, and I believe the A6400 as well. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna ignore that basic correction tab and go straight for the curves tab. And in the RGB curves, I'm gonna hit a central node there. I'm gonna hit a shadows node and a highlights node. And then the blacks node and the whites node, they stay where they are for now. Just drag down that shadows node and have a look at your shadows here in the lumetri scopes, because you're not going to want to bring these all the way down because that's going to look terrible. Everything's crushed in the shadows when it shouldn't be. It should be crushed in the blacks, or not crushed, but it should be near to zero in the blacks, but not in the shadows. So I'll bring my shadows down to about, maybe there. And in the highlights, the same thing. I'm going to bring it up. I'm not going to whack it all the way up there because, again, that's what the whites are for, not the highlights. So the highlights I'll bring up to maybe there. Yeah, about there. A little less. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and then I'm gonna come over to Creative, where I have my vibrance and my saturation. Vibrance and saturation work very differently. Saturation will affect the colors in the entire picture. Every single piece of color, piece of information that's colored in that, which is every pixel, because every pixel is a color, it's going to increase the saturation of that color, make it more punchy, make that color more, how do you define saturation without saying the word saturation? It's going to make it look more colorful. But as you can see, if I push that way too far, I mean, that just looks unreal because the skin tones, I mean, he looks like, it looks like he's had a really bad fake tan job. And that's not what you want. That's not flattering at all. However, vibrance works similarly to saturation in that it will affect the colors all around the picture, except for what it deems to be a range of skin tones. And that means that your vibrance can get punched up. It will saturate everything except for what it deems to be skin tones. So oranges, reds, yellows, and if you have a darker complexion, it will remove any kind of oranges and reds from your skin tone. Or not remove them, but it just won't accentuate them. And now obviously I put it this high because I wanna, prove a point, but you'd never have your vibrance that high, really. Maybe put it at about 40. 40 is a nice number. Let's go with 40. And then the general saturation, the kind of master layer of saturation, you could put it maybe 110, and that will just bring back in a little bit of saturation on that. And if you hit this little global effects mute, which if you don't see it there, you can find it with that plus button there and just drag it down to that menu. If you hit that, then you can see your before and after, how you've treated that shot. And that's nice. It's not fantastic, but it's decent. Here's where the magic happens though. If you come to your color wheels, this is where you're going to start actually affecting the image, giving the image a certain look and feel. So if you wanted to go really cinematic and go for a sort of teal and orange thing, which is very popular, you could drag your shadows down towards this sort of teal area, and you'll see that everything starts being affected with that color that is dark. And then the midtones you want to drag up in the opposite direction to complement it. So you have opposite directions for complementing colors. And now those blacks are still looking a little bit gray, right? Because this is the darkest point in my whole picture is right here, which I'm guessing is this jacket part here. And that's just not, that's not anywhere near black. So what you can do is come back to your curves, and this time you can actually just drag your blacks node along there, just so that it's a little bit closer to black. And the same thing with your whites. Your whites are not quite where they're meant to be. So maybe to there. Yeah, that's decent. Okay, I'm gonna drop the shadows down a little bit just to balance it out a touch. Okay, and now while we're in the curves section, we're gonna come down to this new area that's in CC 2019. And I've seen a few people do this where they completely desaturate the shadows and the highlights, and I really don't like that. They claim that it's professional, but it's really not professional to have zero saturation in the shadows or in the blacks. That's nonsense. What is, somewhat nicer is that if you have this teal and orange look, that your blacks don't look teal. That looks like a very kind of early 2000s Matrix look, which, Matrix is a professional film, but it doesn't, it's a bit too tinted, it's a bit too toned, if that makes sense. So what I like to do is just desaturate the highlights and the shadows, or the whites and the blacks, I should say, a little bit. Not very much, but just a little bit, like that much. I mean, it's hardly noticeable, but it does make a subtle difference. Now if we look at our before and after, well, that's a significant difference now. That's something that I'm happy to actually run with. Like that's a nice looking color grade, if I say so myself. So then, cool, what do I do with that? Well, now you make a LUT. So you come up to the very top of the Lumetri panel here, where you've got Lumetri color, click on these three lines and export .cube. You can export it as a .look file so that when you come into creative, you can add it directly to these look panels. If you want, I don't really like doing that because I don't know, I'm just used to using .cube. If you have an argument for using .look files, leave it in the comment. I would be really genuinely curious to know why people use .look, because as I understand it, it's far more limited to Adobe Premiere Pro and a few other apps, but it's not something you can share with all of the different editing suites, whereas .cube, that is. And now you just save the file. Teal orange, HLG3, hybrid log gamma 3. So now if we come up to our effect controls and just delete that Lumetri color effect so that there's no color grade on that whatsoever, you can come to basic correction, browse for a LUT, select your teal and orange HLG3, and there you go. Bam, it's applied as a LUT, and it's a LUT that doesn't suck. It's not overly processed, it's not overly done, it's not completely over or underexposed or completely the wrong color temperature, because actually you're not affecting the color temperature or exposure of it. You're literally just affecting the sort of general contrast and curves and shadow saturation and hue and highlight saturation and hue with the teal and orange. So then if you apply this to your footage and it's not enough, well then you can go and add, more contrast. You can go and add more curves. If you're on an S-Log2 or S-Log3, you'll probably need to add more curves to this. Just make it, a harsher effect. But at the same time, if you're on a cine profile, or if you're not even on any profile and it's just straight out of the camera and that's way too harsh of an effect, what you can do is just plop an adjustment layer on top of your clip, come into your basic correction, choose your LUT, and then in the effect controls, just remove that stopwatch on the opacity, because we don't want to keyframe the opacity, and just drop the opacity of that layer. And that way, the color grade that's on that layer also drops in opacity, ergo drops in intensity. And it's that simple to make a LUT. You just run your way through the curves, through the creative, and then over to your color wheels, and then come up and export cube, and you're done. Victory sip. All right, let me know in the comments if you found this helpful or if you thought it was completely useless. Either way, it's good to know. I think color grading is a really subjective thing. You might love this kind of look, you might hate it, you might want it to be more processed, you might want it to be less processed. You know, you might really like this faded film look, you know, very shallow blacks. I personally, I'm not the biggest fan. Sometimes it's appropriate, but most of the time I find it's just lazy color grading to try and make it look vintage and cool. But there you go. That's how I do my color grading. I don't spend hours and hours on it. I do something that looks good and I think, okay, yeah, I like that. I'll tweak it here and there. I'll then adjust within the image the secondary color correction by adding a second layer of lumetri and maybe bringing the exposure of this fence up, maybe bringing the saturation of these orange leaves up without affecting the oranges in his face. That kind of thing. That's actually where your color correction really stands out more, is in the secondaries, because that's where you really accentuate things and you guide the viewer's eye based on the color, based on the light that's in your shot. All right, give it a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, if you're gonna use this in your own footage workflow thing, and hit that subscribe button to get more videos from me at dodmedia in my new studio. Isn't this cool? It's awesome. If you've got any requests for other tutorials, definitely leave them in the comments or send me a tweet at dodmedia or send me a message on Instagram at dodmedia. I look forward to hearing from you. Cheers.